Hello, everyone. Welcome to the resume workshop. This is in conjunction with the Evening with Industry Committee, and we just wanted to give some tips on how you can improve your resume. One thing to note is that these are all just suggestions. It's not a right or wrong answer on how to do your resume, but these are just tips that we found helpful in crafting your resume. So just general things of what your resume should show. This is your first introduction to a recruiter or a company. So you want to put all of what you're great at on there. So including your special skills, any leadership experience you have, any accomplishments you have within your work experience or within leadership or projects. And then also just to have some good talking points on there. So what your passions are, you can show that through your experiences and through your projects. And then also where you're headed. So current developments within your project or research and goals within your club. So basically the format that we're going to have for this workshop is going through the Career Center technical resume that UCLA has. And we're going to break down each section and then kind of describe what should be in that section. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you can craft good bullet points for each of your major like project or experience sections. And then we will be going to breakout rooms so you can get some feedback on your resumes if you're interested. So starting off with the header, you definitely want this to be a big important section that people can easily read. So you want your name in big font, should be easy to read. And then also having your contact information. So your email or your phone number, and then also your LinkedIn handle or a website if you have a website associated with your projects. That's just a good way to supplement your resume and get some more information out there. Also, you can have an objective. If you do have an objective, keep it brief. An objective is just basically what you're looking for in a position. So if you're looking for an internship or a full-time position and what field you might be interested in. But in general, for technical resumes, this is not completely necessary. It's kind of a personal preference. And then location. So you can write Los Angeles, California, if you're interested. And then also US citizen. I included this because specifically for aerospace and mechanical majors, it is sometimes important to have your citizenship status because a lot of defense companies are looking for that information. That's one of like the requirements for a lot of the positions they have, but that also depends on what industry you're interested in. So also personal preference. Also, one thing to note, they do have a typo here next to where they write Los Angeles, California. And I'll talk about it later about how you don't want to have typos, but just make sure your formatting looks the same and it's consistent throughout your resume because that's an easy thing just to set yourself apart. Then next section should be education. So you definitely want to list your major and minor if you have one and your expected graduation date. Another thing you could do is mention specifically if you're a third or fourth year. And that is just specifically if you're looking for internships or full-time positions that require being a third or fourth year, it's sometimes good to just state that. If you are younger than that, it might not be as necessary because some companies do kind of filter out first or second year students because they're gearing their internships more to upperclassmen. So that's just a case-by-case basis for companies. And then also listing your GPA. And some optional things you can list are your tech breadth or your track. So for example, in aerospace, you can choose to have the space track or the aero track. And so that can be a good thing to list. And then also relevant coursework. This is kind of up to you if you include it or not. Sometimes the job description that for a job you might be applying for asks for a specific background. And if you don't have that with your clubs or projects, putting it in a relevant coursework section could be a good idea. And then one other thing to note is that if you are a first year student or a transfer student, it is definitely good to list your previous school and the GPA from that school. And once you have an established GPA at UCLA, then you're welcome to take off your previous school and just keep UCLA. So this is just what that whole header section would look like. So we already talked about the name and the contact information, but here they have their education listing the school, their major, their technical breadth, this person is also getting a certificate in Russian language. So if you're doing anything similar to that, you're welcome to include that there. Your GPA, any honors or scholarships that you might have that are associated with this could be in that section. And then relevant coursework, you'll see that their relevant coursework kind of takes up a fair amount of space on the page. And a lot of times you might not have that much room. So you don't have to be as thorough. One good way to save space is taking out all of the intro to in front of all the class names. And this can also make you seem a little bit more proficient in the classes that you've taken. Because if you, for example, have like intro to CAD and drafting versus if you just wrote CAD and drafting, it implies that you have a little bit more experience rather than just listing it as an intro class. And then one other good thing to note is if you're in progress with some of your upper division classes, you can list that. And even if you might not have completed it by the time you're doing your interview, you will have probably completed it by the time the internship position starts. So it's a good idea to give a recruiter an idea of what kind of classes you'll have completed by then. And then after the header section, you kind of have some leeway to do what you want based on your previous experiences. So I'll go through it and list a bunch of options that you'll have, and then we'll talk about what they do specifically in the technical resume example. But you can talk about your work experience. That's pretty self-explanatory. So any internships you had, technical jobs, including tutoring and research, or you can include research in this next section with research and projects. And this can also include any project-based clubs that you're a part of. So Rocket Project or Bruin Racing are great examples of how you've used like hands-on experience with your engineering degree. And then extracurricular experience. So any clubs or personal development, this is a good section that you can show leadership, even if it's potentially not in a like engineering like background. And then also skills, both technical and additional. So additional skills could be like any languages you have that you're skilled at, or anything that has required training. So you don't want to say like, I can read, because that's pretty obvious. But if you have skills that you have done training for multiple years, that could be a good area to put it in. And then technical skills include stuff like machining and also programming languages. I have an example here of a creative way that I believe a UCLA professor did. And he listed his coding languages as if they were real languages, so how fluent he was in each one of them. That's just a creative way to do it. It's definitely not like a standard way, but listing the proficiency level that you have in the languages is also a good idea. And then if you have extra space at the bottom, you can always include activities or interests. So that's a great way to show what else you're involved with. And I did hear a story once of somebody who was hired for an internship at Northrop Grumman, and he talked about being on a golf team, and he ended up getting the internship, and he started a golf like group with his whole intern team. So that's just a good way to show your personality if you do have space at the bottom of your resume. So you'll see here they have basically a general structure for each section. So they list the company or organization that they're part of, and then their title. And then underneath that, there's generally between 2 and 4 bullet points that are specific and show specifically your contribution and the results from the like role that you had. And then also you'll see right justified over here, the dates that you were involved with this project. And it's always good to include dates because it shows the longevity of how long you were involved with something, and can kind of prove that you're willing to stay with one thing and grow yourself within that. And then going further, the skills section, like I mentioned earlier, if you have machining skills, you can list that here, as well as any computer languages that you know. And then for activities, obviously water polo is not directly related to engineering, but this is a leadership position that this person has and is still able to show that you are able to work well with people and take on a leadership position in that kind of responsibility. And then languages, like any non-coding languages, like real spoken languages, you can list that as well. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the bullet points. So those are the bullet points that are going in each of those projects or experiences sections. The biggest thing is making sure that your resume easily shows what you were involved in to the recruiters, because generally recruiters will skim through your resume. So you want it to be easy for them to find the information, not read through an entire paragraph and kind of struggle with that. And another thing is you can bold keywords or the languages used. That's just an idea to help you like stand out and have it very obvious which languages you might have used on a certain project, but it's up to you. It's not like a need to have. Also, having around 2 to 4 points per entry. So you want to elaborate on your specific contribution and prioritize the bullet points. So you want to say the project that you were most involved with first, and then if there is a secondary project within that same organization that you were slightly involved with, then you can list it afterwards. And then also super important is being consistent about the formatting. So if we look back, I don't know if I'll be able to go back a slide. Let's see. If we look back here, you'll see they're very consistent about their formatting and the font that they have and the italics that they use throughout each section. So you want to make sure that you're being consistent while you're writing each of your sections, and then also keeping the tenses consistent as well. So anything that you're currently doing should be in present tense, and anything that you've already completed should be in past tense. Another thing that we'll talk about in a little bit is making all of your bullet points quantifiable if possible. So that's including numbers. If there was a group that you were part of that had a certain number of people in it, or a competition where there was a certain number of competitors, listing that can just show that you're able to work with other people, and also kind of gives the recruiter an idea of what kind of experience that you have. Yeah, and then also being specific within your bullet points, but not overdoing it. So you want your resume to be broad enough that a recruiter can look at it and see transferable skills that can grab their interest and make sure that they want to interview you, but you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to use all of the jargon that you might use in your clubs, because that can just kind of lose their interest and make it seem like you have too much experience in a very niche area, but you want to make it obvious that you're willing to work on a lot of different things. So one way that you can go ahead and craft these bullet points is with this XYZ formula. So you accomplished X as measured by Y by doing Z. So I think this example comes from Google, but you can easily just say you won second place at a hackathon. That doesn't really give you much information. Then you can say you won second place out of 50 teams at a hackathon. So already we're seeing how competitive this hackathon was. And then a best example would be you won second place out of 50 teams at a hackathon at New Jersey Tech by working with 2 other colleagues to develop an app that synchronizes mobile calendars. So with this, we can see you were able to work with other people. It was a pretty competitive hackathon. It was potentially at a different college that you're going to than the one you're going to. And also you can see what your project was aimed to do. So that can kind of give insight into what sorts of fields you're interested in. All right, and then we'll talk a little bit about some general tips here. So your resume should look nice. It should look just pleasing when you give it to the recruiter for the first time. And if your resume is looking too cluttered, there are some things you can do. So reading through your bullet points and making sure that each of the points are succinct and not being too like wordy about it. And we'll talk a little bit in a second about action words, but you want to make sure to use action words rather than a bunch of filler words. Also, you can remove your high school education or activities. Generally, after your first or second year, you've had enough experience and ability to get involved with clubs at UCLA. And so you can start to remove things from high school, but that also depends on relevance to your major. So if you were part of a research project in high school, then that's something that might be able to stay on your resume longer than, for example, like marching band. And then also making sure you're using all of your white space, but not all of it. So you don't want your resume to look too cluttered. You can't have things like both left justified and right justified the entire way through because that's a lot. But you can right justify the date, for example, like they did in the Career Center example. And then also, we recommend using Word just because there's a lot more control over spacing. And you can also, in the header on Word, put your name and your info. And that's just a good way to use space and make sure that you're not like being too overwhelming with how your resume looks. And then just some general things to remember. So keep your resume to one page. Definitely sometimes recruiters like discount a resume if it's too lengthy. So be respectful of that, and also making sure you're succinct. Being able to talk succinctly about the projects that you're involved in is also a skill. So that's something to think about. And then being consistent again with your bullet points and making sure that that makes sense. And then as far as font and margins, just be realistic about it. You need it to be easy to read, so don't make your font smaller than like 10-point font. And then your margins shouldn't be less than half an inch. You don't want to look like the page is completely filled with words. And then action words. Let's see if I can move this really fast. So action words are words that show your specific contribution. So I've listed this link here. And these are just some words that you can say instead of like member of or worked on. And that shows a little bit more that you took initiative and were able to like get something done. And then being specific. So you want to tailor your resume to the specific job that you're applying for. So if they say they want somebody with CAD experience and you do have CAD experience, then definitely list that somewhere on your resume. And then also using numbers if possible to quantify what you've done. And then finally, proofread it. If there is a like typo on your resume, it's just super easy to fix. And so if possible, have somebody else read it over, a friend or family member, specifically a friend who might not know very well what you do, just to make sure that you are like successfully explaining what you do. Also, I just noticed, I think Kate asked in the chat, the link for the action words will be sent out. And when you all go into breakout rooms, the link will be on there for you guys to look at it more. Breakout rooms now. Good transition. Okay, so I think Annie maybe was working on the breakout rooms.
Yes, still working on the breakout rooms. If you want to give me some time, and also maybe if you want to plug the interview series.
Yes, that's in a couple slides. Let me get out of this view really fast. Okay, so I'll just go through this breakout room resource that we made so everybody's on the same page for when we do go into breakout rooms. So, okay, and Allison just sent the action verbs list. So basically in breakout rooms, the goal is to get some feedback on your resume. So in each room, there should be somebody who indicated on that sign-in form that they're willing to discuss your resume. So the goal is to have one person share their resume and kind of get feedback from anyone in the group. If you're not comfortable sharing your GPA or if there's any personal information on your resume, feel free to take that off. We're not here to like stalk you or anything. And then also you have time to work through the XYZ formula. So that's the formula that's you accomplished X by doing Y and resulting in Z. And that is just a good way to like go through and recraft your bullet points. So if you already have bullet points, but they might not be as strong, you can work with your group and kind of improve those statements. And then we have this active verb list, like I mentioned. You can definitely use those active verbs in those bullet points that you're making. And then I also included the link for the UCLA Career Center, which has tons of resources. Most of the information about the resume is from there. So definitely check that out. And then if you haven't already, make a Handshake account because a lot of the UCLA Career Center events are on Handshake and you can register for them now. So for that engineering and tech fair next week on Thursday, I believe, don't quote me on the day, but You can register for that event now through Handshake as well. How are we doing? I believe you're muted, Annie.
Love that. Yes, I am ready to start breakout rooms. If you want to stop recording it, we can move on to breakout rooms.
Great. All right.
Oh, and we got to make sure everyone can share screen.
I think you're able to in breakout rooms.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to pause the recording and then I'll start it again later for the last half. Thank you all. Okay. All right. So like we've been mentioning the whole time, the UCLA Career Center has lots of useful resources. There's a lot of resume tips. This link is specifically what we were talking through today. And you can see that example technical resume if you click on this link and scroll down a little bit. And then next is VMock. This is a really cool platform through UCLA, and you can get your resume reviewed by the system. So all you have to do is upload your resume. It has to be in Word format, not PDF format. So keep that in mind. And it will rate how well you ranked on certain categories. So over here, you'll see like if you had enough specifics, if you overused any words. As far as presentation, having the correct number of pages. So you should only have one page. If you have more than one page, it automatically docks you some points. Just the overall format and how it looks. And then as far as competencies, that is just making sure that the words in your resume demonstrate you have communication skills, leadership skills, teamwork skills, and that sort of things. And then what's really cool is once you finish and get like your initial grading on your resume, then you can go back and edit it within the platform. So it'll pull up your header section and say, okay, well, one thing you could do is also include your LinkedIn website. And then you put that in, like press a little check mark, and then you like get a couple more points. And I believe there's like 10 different times that you can go through this process. So if you have more questions after tonight, or just any questions like super late at night and you're not able to ask anybody, this could be a good resource. And then also through the Career Center website, there's a lot of career and job worksheets. There's tips on Handshake. If you haven't already registered for Handshake, the link is in the breakout room link that we had sent out earlier, but definitely take care of that. And also LinkedIn if you have any questions on that. And then there's also a career building workshop that the Career Center has as well. Some upcoming events to note. Most notably is this Employer Resume Day on Monday next week. And this is really good if you're able to edit your resume between tonight and next week, and you want an employer to look at it and kind of tell you what sorts of things their specific company might look for in a resume. One thing to note is that all employers are different in what they look for, and it's all just personal preference. And so you can get all the advice you want, but in the end, it's just up to you and how best you want to present yourself. And then the computer science night and the engineering and tech fair are also next week. So you can register for those on Handshake, I believe. And I would say the sooner the better, because specifically for the engineering and tech fair, they do have like set times that you talk to each company that you want to talk to. And you have to register for those ahead of time. And apparently they're starting to fill up. So definitely get on that. Information for all of that is on Handshake. And then just a little plug here. The Evening with Industry Committee is planning to do professional development workshops throughout the year. And up next is our 2-part interview series. So the link is right here if you want to RSVP. It'll be during week 4. And the first part is just talking about how to sell yourself during those interviews. And then the second part, you'll sign up for mock interviews with UCLA alumni. And that's a good way to just practice presenting yourself and making sure that you get the experience that you need. Specifically, if you've never had an interview before, this could be a good way to get some practice. And then thank you. That is all we had. I'm going to stop the recording now, but if you have any questions, feel free to speak up or say it in the chat.
Also,